Hello there, this is Alexander Hall, going to talk to you about my assessment for What Do I Need with Love from Thoroughly Modern Millie on the 29th of November. So, I'm going to give you like a full synopsis, well, like a kind of full way of how my process worked when working on the song and getting it to where it was when it came to doing the show, which I'll probably do in another video. But I'm going to talk to you about my particular assessment on the 29th before I went into doing the full song on stage on the 4th of December, until I remembered it. Excuse. Right. So, firstly, what specific methods did I use in the rehearsals, and how did it help me? So, I did a lot of independent study to get where I was going for, to get my way with the character Jimmy Smith. So I used the likes of trying to watch the 1968 film version, which had Julie Andrews, who played Millie Dilmont, and I wanted to kind of use that as like a helping hand to make particular notes that I could find by watching the film. So I picked out that it was that the whole film itself, and of course the storyline, is set in 1922 in New York, talking about how the characters met, what was the circumstance that came about, and what was the aim that some of the characters wanted. So I looked through that. The other thing that I did, because in 1968 when the film came out, this song, What Do I Need with Love, was not in that. It was in the 2002 original Broadway showing on stage. So it was on the first real commercial stage production of Thoroughly Modern Millie. And it firstly starred Gavin Creel as Jimmy Smith, and also Sutton Foster, who was Millie Dilmont. And I thought to myself, take the first version as like an inspiration for how I'm going to sing the song and how I'm going to work on it. And Gavin Creel is just one of my absolute favourite musical theatre actors through him, because he's got this tenor voice, but he doesn't make it sound really quite operatic. So he's got this use of country sound to it, which is something that I do like. I do like the kind of opera sounding musical actors and singers, such as Ramin Karimlo and of course Michael Ball and Alfie Boe. But the thing that I like about Gavin Creel is he's got that tenor voice, but he's got a lot more variety in his voice. So you can probably expect him to do like a bit of like a voice up here, I'm gonna sing like that, because I know he also was in Book of Mormon. And he would go, "Hello, my name is Elder Price." I'm gonna go over, but yeah, he's a great example of a great musical singer actor to look out for when you're trying to use like good examples of good actors who have a good variety of good vocal styles that they give to their roles. The next thing I would say is also there's Dan Burton, who did this Broadway album of all of his favourite songs from Broadway shows, and that was one of the ones that he picked. And he's genuinely a good singer. He's not one of my absolute favourites, but I think he's one of those ones who just does his part for commercials instead of actually doing it for passion. But again, that's just how I feel about it. But he had a good sense to it, but it's nowhere near as good as Gavin Creel's. So there's a difference between that. Anyhow, on that note, the thing that I would say from looking through everything was I learned how to kind of like look at Jimmy's aim. So with the film, obviously, I could see that, Jimmy Smith is like, he's genuinely a nice guy, and and I think he has that feel of neediness in him as well, but doesn't try to show that through himself, but sometimes does show it quite well without realizing. So with how he talks about how he wants to take on with Millie, but then Millie rejects him and says, well, I'm looking for bosses, so I'm afraid I'm not going to choose you. And it ended up with Jimmy then realising that, Millie's already found Trevor Graydon, who is the boss of her new job. And she then, from that point, Jimmy was kind of jealous, lost for words, and he's trying to think, how am I going to win her over that guy, Trevor? Even though Trevor's rich, how can I get her to love me? So it's kind of, and back in the 20s, women were more for money than they were for real love. Real love wasn't found in that time, and a lot of, women were very picky at who they chose. A bit like what, it still happens, a lot of women do look for good men with good wealth instead of good personality, and it's quite a difficulty in this day and age. But I think it's kind of a saying to don't just go for money as a way of finding good people to get on with for the rest of your life, because it's never going to work that way. It's sometimes never going to be a good brainer to take on. And, also seeing how Jimmy did then say at the end, when also Dorothy, his sister, who's also one of the orphans that got kidnapped and then they had to rescue her at the end, that they were on the hunt, and Muzzy, they're one of the sinner, the actual sinner, like the actual main big sinner, sent them out on a quest to find women and men who were not in it for money, who are actually in it for real love. And that's how it ended, and that's how they kind of showed their own identity right at the end. And it ended off because, there was confusion going on between Millie and Trevor, because Trevor fell in love with Dorothy, and Millie was in love with Trevor, and then, of course, Jimmy was in love with Millie, Millie wasn't in love with Jimmy, and it all came all together, and then all of a sudden it mashed, and that's when they all came with the right relationship that caught them. So it's kind of like the same thing you get with quite a few musicals, a bit like Grease, maybe not exactly like Grease, but it's near the same. But that's how I kind of learned the method of how to find what Jimmy was feeling, because he probably was jealous. He's quite unsure why Millie isn't in love with her. He's trying to ask himself, how do I get to girls to love me, because I keep finding someone I'm never going to meet Muzzy's standards. And that's the kind of thing that was going through his head at that time. So getting that out while he was in the jail, after he had just been arrested by buying drinks for Dorothy and Millie at the speakeasy, and doing it illegally at that time because of what was happening in the 20s and the laws that were at that time, that you could see in that. Yeah, anyway, the